Good morning to you if you are in America. Good afternoon to you if you are in certain parts of America. Good evening to you if you are in Africa. If you are in England, anywhere in Europe, good evening to you. My name is Dr. Enoch Opoku Entry, and as I promised last week, I'm going to come your way today with another very pertinent topic that we're going to talk about. As you can see that my current Facebook page is almost finished. I have almost 5,000 friends there, and that is the limit that I cannot go beyond. So I've opened a new official Facebook page, and that is Professor Enoch Opoku Entry. So those of you who are on my Facebook, you can see from the flyer, that is my new official page, Professor Enoch Opoku Entry. When you go there, all these videos will be there. Next week, I will talk about religion and leadership in Africa. But this week, or today, I'm going to talk about African media, bought, rented, or opinion press. Once again, good evening to you wherever you find yourself, and good morning to you wherever you find yourself, depending on your time zone. I will be reading your comments, and then I will mention your name, then we talk about issues that bothers Africa. I've had many calls from California, from most part of Nigeria, from Kenya, and people are asking me, how come that you have friends who are coming from these countries and they don't share it with us? Well, friends, let me tell you a secret. I have some of my colleagues who are leadership professors, and they are consultants, as I also do. And when they talk at a university or an event for 2 hours, they charge $20,000. That's what they do, $20,000 for 2 hours talk on leadership. And I am doing this free because of the love I have for Africa. So it is important for you to share these videos so that our brothers and sisters and our leaders in Africa can see the wind of change that we all want to bring to our part of the world. All right, so today's topic is African media bought, rented, or opinion press. And what I do different in my presentations are scholarly materials engaging and accessible to many more readers and viewers and listeners, just as I do in my lecturing classes. You will find out that my presentations seek solutions to African leadership challenges in key areas of development that I choose to talk about. Now, we have many elections in Africa this year. Many of the African countries are going to have elections this year and next year. And we know elections bring violence and wars. All the studies have shown that anytime there is an election in Africa, any part of the 54 countries in Africa, it brings wars and violence. And the media is our voice and eye to educate and inform the people to forestall peace in our land. So let's put the entertainment part of the media aside when it's an election year and talk about issues. I've been a media practitioner for a while. I was a morning show host on radio. I have been on newspaper before. I have spent a whole year with the Chamber of Commerce studying media in America and other places. And I can tell you that the media is very important. The fourth realm of government is very important when we're talking about information and education to the people. Also being the watchdog over these politicians and the other arms of government to make sure that the people are informed about what is going on. So for those of you who choose the media and public relations as a professional calling, let me ask you one question. Have you heard about people whose name will never leave us? Somebody like Plato, somebody like Aristotle, somebody like Socrates, somebody like Immanuel Kant, somebody like Friedrich Nietzsche, somebody like Rene Descartes, somebody like Thomas Aquinas, somebody like Confucius, somebody like John Dewey, somebody like Jesus of Nazareth, somebody like Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, somebody like Pythagoras, somebody like Gautama Bandhi, somebody like John Dewey. All these people, why do you think that their names have remained with us forever? Did they have money? Did they have houses? Did they have cars? All they left with us is ideas and a model of good examples. That is why they have become great spiritual leaders and great teachers, and everybody wants to learn from them. That is what I want our journalists to do. Think about how these people have left us a great legacy of ideas and great examples that we are all following. So if you have been called to be a journalist or a media practitioner, don't think about money. Think about all the names that I mentioned and the ideas and leadership examples that they left behind. That is what I want you to go for. So most of our nations of Africa were born in the late 1950s and the early 1960s. I'm talking about when they gained independence from the British or their previous colonial masters. African history is a record of colonialism, primarily by the British, the French, the Dutch, the Portuguese, and the early print media were created to serve the colonists, not the native population. And this study is coming from a lady called Biagi in 2012. So you can see that the media in Africa was established to serve the interests of the colonists, but not Africans. According to a global research, the first English newspaper in sub-Saharan Africa was called the Cape Town Gazette, an African advertiser, and that appeared in 1800 in South Africa. A year later, I'm talking about 1801, the first black newspaper, which is the Royal Gazette and the Sierra Leonean Advertiser, appeared in Sierra Leone. That was the French settler, and they also established, some newspapers that includes Fraternite Matin, and that was established for the French colonies too. Then there was a Portuguese settler who also established a newspaper called Nicosias, and that was established in Zimbabwe in the early 1800s. So in Kenya, we have some 3 tabloid newspapers that enjoy circulation with relative independence. I'm talking about the Daily Nation and the Standard in English. And then they have the Swahili daily called the Taifa Leo. So currently we have many newspapers and thousands of radio stations in Africa, which is a good thing. But they are all established in English and French. So let's think about the media and local languages. Is there a way we can establish some of the media in our local languages? I'm talking about radio is doing well in local languages, but not the print media. So let's think about some of our local languages and either dailies or weeklies that we can establish in our local languages. One thing I also observed from America, from CNN and other places, is that the foreign media, advanced countries' media, talk more about their own issues than other countries' issues. If you flip the coin to Africa, you can see that African media, even though they talk about local issues, they have a lot of international news that does not add any value to the local people. So what do we do to make sure that African media talks more about African issues so that we solve our own problems? Because it is okay to talk about 1 or 2 foreign news once a while. But if you come to America, if you go to Europe, the only thing you see about Africa is wars and other things. They don't waste their time, I'm using waste in quotes, to talk about African issues because it doesn't bother them. That's not their problem. I'll tell you this funny story. I went to one conference and there was this guy who came to do a presentation. He had a very popular newspaper in America with a very bold front page that says Africa, the darkest continent on earth. And he talked about his research in Africa. What I've seen in research that I've done and have seen other people also done is that the perception they have about Africa before even they come to Africa to conduct their research, most of the time they don't find it that way because their mind has been twisted in a way of seeing Africa negatively. But when they come to do research, if they thought about finding corruption, I'm just using corruption as an example, for about 55%, it might end up about 40% that says that, yes, there's corruption. So the numbers do not match. This guy came and did a presentation that Africa is the darkest continent on this planet. And when I saw it, I approached him and I said, no, you have no idea. Have you been to Africa before? He said, no, I just read. And said, that's wrong. Go to Africa and then see things for yourself. There are many good things being done in Africa that nobody talks about. Yes, we have our own challenges, but how come that you cannot talk about the positive sides? And then he said, you know, some of you professors in America will have to champion the cause of Africa. We're not going to speak for you. You have to speak for yourself. And I accepted the challenge. That is one of the reasons why I do this talk for Africa. Because I've had many calls that the talk that you talk about leadership fits the whole world. Yes, I understand. But my focus is in Africa because I want Africa to do well. I wish Africa well. And I wish our leaders would sit up so that we have model African countries that are doing well and we can challenge the rest of the world. That is all that I want. It's not about money. It's not about fame or anything. I was in radio. I left radio. So I don't want to be heard. I don't want to be known. My point is that I want Africa to do well and I wish Africa well. That's all I want. So I took the challenge that African scholars like myself, who is a professor in leadership studies, have to talk about African problems and then fix it ourselves because nobody is going to fix it for us. I've seen a Kenyan man says, well done, my brother. Thank you, Akenya. Greetings to you. Kweku from Ponyabua says, great insight. Thank you, Kweku. Charlotte Kukwa who said, well spoke. When I see your name, I will call it because this is a live show. This is a live video. So anybody who make a comment, I will call your name and then we talk about this. According to media scholar L. John Martin, he says Africans have never been an information press. It has always been an opinion press. Now, my friends, let's think about this. I saw about 8 different research that says that African media have always been an opinion press, not an information press. Sorry. So that means that we have always given our information through opinion, but we don't do research in our media. What are the media doing in terms of research? Do we just Google, get any information and put it out there? I will talk about sensationalism, how we exaggerate things in Africa in the media, and we talk about things that are not even part of what we're supposed to present to our people. So Martin found that advocacy journalism comes naturally to Africans to the extent that they feel a need for hard news, and that need is satisfied by the minimal coverage of the mass media, especially the radio. So to become an information press instead of just an opinion press, this is what we have to do in research and in education. If you are a journalist or a media practitioner, it is your job to push for blueprints of government policies. That is number one. So if government is bringing free senior high school, the journalists are supposed to dig deeper to get a blueprint. Where are we getting the funds from? How are we going to sustain it? That is your job as a journalist to tell the people. If the government comes with free basic education, it is the media's job to find a blueprint about how this is going to be done. How are we going to fund it? Who are going to be the stakeholders? And what are the numbers of students every year? How is it going to be? Unless we do that, then we are not doing our job well as a media, especially if we want to be information press instead of opinion press. Then time to change our content. I've seen many media in Africa, I'm talking about print, the radio and TV, where it's been the same thing for years. You cannot continue to do the same thing every year and expect different results. So I expect the media in Africa to change the content. You give too much space to politicians. Bring experts to talk about issues that affect the people's development and growth. Don't concentrate too much on politicians. Concentrate on people. Go to the street and talk to the ordinary person who goes through the daily hustle, and they can tell you what is going on. So I want the media in Africa to change the content. We give too much space to politicians. Where are the doctors? Where are the professors who are expertise in different areas, in agriculture, in farming, in engineering, all these areas? Bring them and let them talk, because they bring different perspective to our land. Don't concentrate on these politicians alone. Then talk about the CEOs' performances. The CEOs in our countries, what are their performances? Who is even monitoring them? We concentrate too much on the police and other civil servants. But the CEOs, the top CEOs who are making big monies, what are their performances? What are these corporate organizations? What are they doing? What is the return on that investment that we have on these CEOs who are riding in big cars and sleeping in big houses? The other thing I want you to talk about, the media, is the origins of your country. Not many people know the history of their countries in Africa. So talk about the origins of Ghana, origins of Nigeria, origins of Kenya, origins of Liberia, origins of Egypt, origins about Morocco. Let your people know about your origins. That is important. And then why you are a republic or a democratic country or you are a kingdom. And the model that you practice, let your people know. And it is the job of the media to do that. The other thing is that, what are the government powers? I'm talking about the governing powers of the country. And what are the ideal situations for practicing those governing powers? Here I'm talking about the governing powers that includes the inherent powers, delegated powers, amendment of the Constitution, reserved powers, concurrent powers, and relations with different types of government, the ministries, regions, districts, and departments. The media should talk about that. Then the three branches of the government, the legislature, which is those who make laws for the country, the executive, those who oversee management of the government, and then the judiciary, who interprets the laws of the land as stated or implied in the Constitution. The media should explain this to the people. Let's pick the executive or the presidency. Let's talk about the powers of the president to the people, the staff at the offices of the president and what they do. Are they many? And what are each functions that they do at the staff of the presidency? And then the cabinet of the president. People should know about that. The media should talk about that. What about even the role of the vice president and his office? Our people are supposed to know this. The content of our media in Africa is a lot of junks. We talk about unnecessary things when we have pressing issues of filth that is engulfing it. That filth is swallowing the people. Hunger is killing the people. Poverty is killing the people. And yet we give these politicians a lot of space to talk about many issues that directly do not affect the pockets of the people. Let's fix that. We also talk about the judiciary, the history of the Supreme Court, the leadership of the Supreme Court, the powers of the Supreme Court, some landmark Supreme Court cases. The media should talk about that, how they arrive at those decisions so that the people can learn from that. How a bill becomes a law. How many of our country citizens know how even a bill becomes a law in our country? How bills are introduced, assigned to the committees, assigned to subcommittees, returned to the full committee, the House Rules Committee, and the calendar even of the sitting, and how debates are conducted in our parliament. How many of our people know this? Unless we begin to work on these things, we will be seen by the foreign media as just an opinion press, but not an information press. We also have to talk about political system, the history of party politics, and the journey that they have gone through to the present situation. Different government agencies and their roles in building the country, we should also talk about that. Now, we can even talk about the political class, how people join politics, and before you know, they are rich overnight. I was looking at these studies that we are building a political class throughout the world. And people who get into politics get rich overnight. Last elections in America, I'm talking about 2016, $3.1 billion was raised and spent on elections alone. In America, $3.1 billion was raised and spent on elections alone in 2016, according to Politico.com and then Pew Study. So those of you who are in Africa who are learning about democracy, look at how expensive democracy has become. It's about money now. What about if there was no political campaign? Let's think about how African democracy should be, and the media should begin to bring the debate out there to the people. What about if there's no political campaign? The Greek people who brought democracy, they did the lottery system. So the Greek people, when they started democracy, they will look into the community and look at wise people, people who are dedicated to the cause of the people, and then they will ballot, kind of random sampling, pick some names, and then they kind of a lottery system, pick one name and say, hey, you're going to lead us. And it worked perfectly fine. Now look at how democracy has become. Moneycracy. It's all about money. And the media in Africa should begin to talk about that, because we don't have money to spend just on political campaigns. Look at how inflation goes up when it's campaigning year, how monies are doled out to people. And the people think that is free money. You are getting that money. It's your own taxpayers' money. That little pieces of it is being given to you. The rest are taken by these politicians for themselves. The media should talk about this. African culture is very diverse, with almost 3,000 different dialects or languages, making it impossible to create a mass circulation newspaper that can appeal to a wide readership. So because we have about 3,000 different languages in Africa, just making a newspaper or a radio that can appeal to the rest of Africa is going to be difficult. One publication that has done well on this side is called the Drum, D-R-U-M. And that paper was published in South Africa, but it is distributed throughout Africa. So let's follow the example of the Drum paper and see how they have been able to reach the rest of Africa, and see if others can also step into the foot of the Drum newspaper. Radio is a very important medium in Africa, and one reason for radio dominance over print is that literacy rate in Africa is quite lower, and radio is also very accessible and the cheapest way for people to follow the news. And I'm happy to announce that we have many radio stations now coming from different small towns instead of the big cities. The last time I came to Ghana last year, Accra alone had about 43 different radio stations, a lot of them. And most of these cities are now beginning, the small towns are beginning to get radio stations. Let's get to small towns and then establish radio stations to talk to our people. In many African countries, there have been conflicts, and anytime there are conflicts, communication networks have been the first to destroy. So those of you who have learned about coup d'etats in Africa, our past, you know that those who do coup d'etat start attacking the radio stations and the national news media first. Journalist Anthony Brand of the Esquire magazine once said, "We in the media are in the business of reporting. After all, most of us believe that the public should know what's going on, has the right to know, has indeed a responsibility to know, and that this right, this responsibility transcends the right to privacy, excuses our pushiness, our arrogance, and therefore ought to protect us from lawsuits even when we are wrong." And I vehemently disagree with journalist Anthony Brand. Most reporters also know that there are times when publishing can harm and ruin people's lives. So think about news that you can publish or write about or talk about that can really ruin people's lives. And I'll explain some of these to you. Members of the press sometimes print gossip as truth. Today I need to drink a lot of water because I didn't sleep well last night, and that's okay. That's all part of life. So members of the press sometimes print truth, gossip as truth. They disregard the impact that they have on people's lives and are ready to believe the worst about people, because worst or bad news is news to the press. Those in the media have much to answer for. The test of good media is one. So if you want to test how good a media person has been, a couple of things we have to look for. The first one is truthfulness. Is what they are telling us the truth? The next one is fairness. Is it fair news? Privacy, and then responsibility. So ethics define a media person's responsibility. Truthfulness enhances your credibility. Fairness means even-handedness. Privacy involves respect, and responsibility brings trust. The media ethical decisions carry consequences. We have professional associations that must prescribe behavior for the media people, and media organizations must respond to criticisms, and professional ethics must preserve media credibility. Privacy for a public figure is both a legal and an ethical issue. In May 2003, the New York Times admitted in a front page story that Times reporter Jason Blair had fabricated comments, concocted scenes, stolen materials from other news services, and selected details from photos to create an impression he had been in certain places and interviewed people when he had not. In less than 2 months, the New York Times, through investigations, made sure that 2 top editors who were responsible for hiring and supervising Blair resigned. So what that Blair story tells us: misrepresenting the facts or creating false stories and attributing them to others can cause readers to question all information published by similar sources. It becomes difficult to separate fictions from facts, and misrepresenting directly affects the credibility of the company or organization that published the story. Even the advertisement and indirectly affects their credibility. Think about false messages in our news media, the radio station, herbal medicines. Most of the herbal medicines that you hear can cure everything. Think about fake pastors who make a lot of claims on our radios and TV stations. Some even double money and nobody questions them. We have parliament who are supposed to make laws to protect the citizens, and somebody come on a national radio and talk about, bring me this money, I will double it for you, and nobody questions them. Somebody will come on a TV station and talk about me being a pastor, and we killed 1, 2 pregnant women and use them for ritual so that we get more members in our church. Nobody calls them to question them. What kind of media are we building in Africa, where people will come and make any bold claim on radio and TV, and we have the law enforcement agencies and nobody calls them to question them about things that they are proclaiming on national TVs and radio stations? Let's think about that and see how we can fix that situation. There are many challenges for the media in Africa to fix, and one of them is disinformation. Disinformation. Yes, if those of you who are contributing, I will be glad to call your name and then read your comments. If you have anything to share with me, please do so, because that is important. Comfort says, exactly. Margaret Sechi says, all you are saying makes sense. Too expensive, bro. IKMS says, one of the ways of building better society is the role of the media. I have noticed with concern how the media had been used as an appendage to sell greed, cutting corners, corruption, laziness, and dishonesty to the people. There are times so-called for these paradigms to shift, the media should imbibe in their contents, tenets, and values that could build a better society. Teach the younger generation about our culture of honesty, integrity, equity, and humility. I perfectly agree with you, AK, for this wonderful contribution. All right. So, your comments were great. AK Mensa, I would love to read some of your comments because we are all learning together. My presentation is like being in a lecture room that I teach, and I expect to learn from my students as they also learn from me. You are my friends, and we are channeling a situation where African leaders in many aspects of leadership rise up and then build our land. We need to fix our own problems. So what is disinformation? It is the intentional planting of false information by government sources. Intentional planting of false information by government sources. We all know that the governments of most African countries have the penchant of peddling false information and making them seem true to the people. It is the job of the media to verify the source of every information they put out there from government sources. Very, very important. The media are supposed to verify every information they get from government sources, because misinformation is the hallmark of most political leaders in Africa. We heard a story where somebody said if they buy a goat or a sheep, tell the people that you bought a cow. Well, there's a big difference between a sheep or a goat and a cow. But most politicians have the tendency to exaggerate whatever is going on. So we need to be careful about that. Be discerning and scrutinize all government sources of information before presenting them to the people. The next one is, if you are a media practitioner, be fair. And fairness implies impartiality. That the journalists have nothing personal to gain from the report. That there are no hidden benefits to the reporter or to the source of the story being presented or being withheld. Media criticism for not being fair results from three things. So if you are not fair as a media practitioner, these are the three things that comes about. The first one is called insider friendship. If you have an insider friendship situation, you're not going to be fair in your reportage. And when we talk about insider friendship, we're talking about close ties that develop between reporters and the stories they cover. Close ties that develop between reporters and the stories they cover. That is called insider friendship. The second one is called conflict of interest. And this is where reporters who accept personal or financial benefit from sources, sponsors, and advertisers. So if you take money or any favor or financial benefit from the source of your story, from sponsors or advertisers, that is called conflict of interest. Then the last one is what we call the checkbook journalism. The checkbook journalism is where reporters pay their sources for stories. Those of you in the media who pay some people to go get you a story, we call that checkbook journalism. And it does not pass the test of being fair in media. So think about that. Comfort said you can say that again. Well, MNSBC reporter Oberlin admitted to contributing $2,400 to domestic congressional candidates for their campaign, and the news anchor suspended her indefinitely. Another co-host of a morning show program in America here from MSBSC, his name was Joe Scarborough. He was also suspended for donating $4,000 to 3 Republican candidates in Florida. So if you are a media practitioner, you are not supposed to contribute money or anything to a political party. That's conflict of interest. And the reasons for suspending all these reporters were simple. You cannot report fairly when you take sides. So media practitioners are not supposed to take sides. Once you do that, you cannot report fairly. Then in 2006, federal investigation charged a guy called Jared Paul Stern. He was a contributor to the New York Post celebrity column, page 6, with trying to extort money from a wealthy businessman called Ronald W. Burkle. And Burkle accused Stern of demanding money in exchange for keeping negative information about him. In 2009, Marcus Brauchi, a newspaper editor of the Washington Post, said, theoretically, you cannot buy Washington Post reporters, but you can rent them. Washington Post editors and the owners are saying that nobody on this planet can buy them, but you can rent them. And what do they mean by renting the media instead of buying them? Anyway, why buy something when you can rent? So let me ask this question. Is Africa media bought or rented? Those of you in the media, you know, I've been in the media before, you know. Are we bought or rented? If we are not bought and being rented, how do we escape from the shackles of being rented or being bought so that we can be fair to present the news as it is to our people? How do we print apology to our readers? Do we take full responsibility for our misinformation? Do we double check or even triple check our news? And do we know that the newsroom remains every newspaper, radio, or TV's biggest asset? Unfortunately, news have become like a joke in Africa, where people bring their own words and their own jokes and make it entertainment. That is not news. I don't know why we like joking about many things. News is very important, and you report it exactly as it's supposed to be. So how do we say our news? Do we have a lot of sensationalism in our news? Do we exaggerate? Do we bring our own words into it? Do we overstate in our news? As an example, how do you report on rape, sexual assault, or indecent exposure? How do you report that? Is there more benefit to society by printing the victim's name with or without a victim's permission instead of withholding it? Should the press explicitly describe sexual crimes, or that is merely sensationalism and leave the details to the courts? Let me give you another case study of this. In 1990, the Des Moines Register published Nancy Ziegemeyer's name in a story about her rape with Ziegemeyer's Corporation. Publication of the victims' names sparked an ethical debate in America among news organizations about whether it is an invasion of privacy to use the victim's name in a rape story. So let's think about most of the rape stories that we talk about. And is it necessary to bring the names of the victims? According to Media Impact reports, most stories could be false. So we have to double check. And those of us who are using social media, Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram, and Twitter, you need to double check your source before you say them. The media can easily be fooled to report on false stories, and there's no need to verify information they report. Once you don't verify, then you're going to report a false story. The credibility of any news organization rests on the way the reporters get the story as much as the story that is reported. So sometimes reporters rush to get a story, they rush to get it, and that leads to bad judgment, which causes serious mistakes to be aired or printed to the people. Yes, there's an error of good faith, and we know that is unintentional, but we should avoid this. Unwise mistakes and lapse in judgment needs to be reprimanded after management reviews. And I'll give you another example. All news organizations must accept responsibility for a lack of editorial review and oversight of stories that should have been stopped before they reach the public. Now let me check those who have commented and see if I want to talk about a couple of them. Yes, so those of you who just joined us, we're talking about African media, bought, rented, or opinion press. And I've talked about how we can fix some of the problems. I'm still doing a presentation. Any ideas that you have, you can also share. It's not me alone. We are all trying to join hands together to fix the problems of Africa. And this study can be represented in or replicated in many parts of the world. But that is not my focus now. My focus, especially, is in Africa. So CBS, talking about CBS, for instance, have instituted what they call the procedures that require independent reviews for investigative stories. So we need that also in Africa, where we can establish reviews in some of these news items. And their reasons are logical. Media standards from the media commissions are not an end in themselves. Standards are ways to achieve fairness and accuracy. I also saw a study by a lady called Shirley Biagi in her book, Media Impact. She talked about 5 philosophical principles that governs media ethics. The first one is Aristotle Golden Mean. Aristotle Golden Mean. According to Aristotle, virtue is the means between two extremes. And this is the philosophy of moderation and compromise, often called the golden mean. The journalistic concept of fairness reflects this idea. The second one is Kant's categorical imperative that came in the 18th century from Immanuel Kant and acts on the maxim which has become a universal law. It means that choose an action by asking yourself this question: what would happen if everyone acted this way? The third one is Mill's principle of utility. That also came in the 19th century. And John Stuart Mill taught that the best decision is the one with the biggest overall benefit for the most human beings. Then we have the fourth one, which is Rawls' veil of ignorance. That came in the 20th century. And according to John Rawls, Rawl is R-A-W-L. Justice emerges from negotiating without social differentiation. He asks everyone to work from a sense of liberty and basic respect for everyone, regardless of social position. The last one is what we all know, what we call the Judeo-Christian view of persons as ends in themselves. Love your neighbor as yourself. Under this long-standing ethic of religious heritage, people should care for one another, friends or enemies, equally and without favor. Trust in people and they will trust in you. So these are 5 ethical pillars that journalists should learn from. The Aristotle golden mean, Kant's categorical imperative, Mill's principle of utility, Rawls' veil of ignorance, and Judeo-Christian view of persons as ends in themselves. It is inappropriate, my friends, for journalists to adopt a philosophy of situational ethics. You must be ethical at all times in all situations. Truth must be your ultimate goal. Don't accept complimentary tickets. Don't accept dinners. Don't accept junkets. Don't accept gifts or favors of any kind from politicians. This is the slogan of the San Bernardino newspaper in California. The San Bernardino newspaper in California have this slogan: we do not accept complimentary tickets, we don't accept dinners, we don't accept junkets, we don't accept gifts or favors of any kind. I want African media to learn from the San Bernardino newspaper in California. In America, the First Amendment protects and shields media from government enforcement of specific code of conduct, except when ethical mistakes are judged by the courts to be legal mistakes. So the media people should watch that an ethical mistake will not be judged as a legal mistake, because when the two conflict, then you have a problem with the law. And remember, some ethical decisions carry legal consequence. For example, when a journalist reports embarrassing facts and invades someone's privacy. So avoid misrepresenting the facts and then invading people's privacy. Make sure you are following the law. We have a society of professional journalists, and they outline some of the important conducts for their members. I want to point a few of them for my friends in the media to know about it. The first one is show compassion for those who may be affected adversely by news coverage. Use special sensitivity when dealing with children and inexperienced sources or subjects. The second one is be sensitive when seeking or using interviews or photographs of those affected by tragedy or grief. We have situations where there have been car accidents and people will just video them live, people dying, and others will video them live. That is not right to do. And journalists who publish that should be careful. Recognize that gathering and reporting information may cause harm or discomfort. Pursuit of the news is not a license for arrogance. And this is coming from the Society of Professional Journalists in the world. Show good taste. Avoid pandering to lurid curiosity. Balance a criminal suspect's fair trial rights with the public right to be informed. And act independently. Journalists should be free of obligation to any interest other than the public's right to know, and should avoid conflict of interest, real or perceived. Remain free of associations and activities that may compromise or damage their integrity. Here, I want to pause and talk about this quickly. The Society of Professional Journalists are saying that if you are a journalist, you have to refrain from associations or activities that may compromise or damage your integrity. There are many associations that we join in our hometowns and the cities. If it is going to affect your integrity of the way you report, you need to avoid that. The next one is refuse gifts, favors, fees, travels, special treatment, and shun secondary employment, political involvement, public office, and service in community organizations if they compromise your journalistic integrity. I've seen many places where journalists have been picked by governments to serve in their governments. Well, that is for another platform that we'll talk about. But according to the Society of Professional Journalists, you have to refuse gifts, favors, fees, free travels, special treatment, and you have to shun secondary employment, political involvement, and public office and service in community organizations if they compromise your journalistic integrity. You have to be accountable to your readers, your listeners, your viewers, and each other. You need to clarify and explain news coverage and invite dialogue with the public over journalistic conduct. Sometimes bring the public in to talk about journalistic conduct and how the public can contribute so that we fix it. Encourage the public to voice grievances against news media. That's also very important. People have grievances about reportage that they don't like, but the media do not encourage people to come out and voice out their grievances. The professional association also have this, that admit mistakes and correct them promptly. Anytime a media person makes a mistake, admit them and then correct them promptly. Immediately, you need to correct them. You have to also expose unethical practices of journalists and the news media and abide by the same high standard that you wish to hold others for. So that is coming from the professional association. Then we have the Professional Electronic Journalists Association. They also have some codes, and I want to point a few of them. Gather and report news without fear or favor, and vigorously resist undue influence from any outside forces, including advertisers, sources, story subjects, powerful individuals, and special interest groups. The next one is resist those who will seek to buy or politically influence news content, or who will seek to intimidate those who gather and disseminate the news. The next one is recognize that sponsorship of the news will not be used in a way to determine, restrict, or manipulate content. And then the last one on them is refuse to allow the interest of ownership or management to influence news judgment and content inappropriately. On accountability, you are accountable for your actions to the public, the profession, and yourself. Respond to public concerns, not your own. Investigate complaints and correct errors promptly and with as much prominence as the original report. Explain journalistic processes to the public, especially when practices sparks questions and controversies. And management must pay journalists well. Yes, journalists in Africa are not paid well. That is why they accept all perks and money from other people. So journalists should be paid well so that they'll be independent in their reportage. Now, having talked about journalists, I'll talk about the other side of the coin, which is public relations practitioners. Public relations practitioners. Now, public relations practitioners are the other side of the coin of journalism work. And I want to take this opportunity to explain to Africans to know the need of that institution when we talk about the media. In classical definition, public relations involves creating an understanding for or goodwill towards an organization, company, a person, or a product. One of the political leaders to realize the importance of public relations was Augustus Caesar. And we all know Augustus Caesar came in the 1st century. He commissioned a statue of himself to be erected throughout the Roman Empire to enhance his image. That is public relations. And since then, many political leaders have ordered heroic images of themselves on printed coins, notes, and stamps. So anytime you see individual notes like Benjamin Franklin on the $100 notes, if you see the big 6 on the money notes of Ghana, if you see all the president, former president on the notes, currency of that country, that is public relations. And if you see those people on the stamps, that is also public relations. Today, public relations approach can be traced to the beginning of the 20th century. Journalists were an important reason for the eventual emergence of public relations as a profession. And Edward L. Bernard, I have this, someone says, great man. Well, I'm just a humble person. Thank you, Samuel. I hope you're doing well. Edward L. Bernays, he wrote the first book on public relations, and he crystallized public opinion and taught the first course of the subject of public relations. Then there's another woman called Doris Fleischmann, and Doris was a public relations pioneer. She began working in the 1920s, and she was the early advocate of public relations as a profession for women. So public relations is an industry of specialists. We have people who have specialized in finances, who are public relations people talking about finances. Others about products, education, government, and even we have individuals who have their own PRs. What most PRs do is crisis communication. And crisis communication is a very important piece of the work of public relations people, because that is a timely response or timely public response to critical situations that could cause damage to an organization or an agency's reputation. And that is why crisis public relations is very important in the PR's job. Let me give you an example. There's a man called Akio Toyoda. He is the president of Toyota Motors Corporation. Those of you who use Toyota cars. And on March 30th, 2010, there was a crisis in communication to overcome their public relations issues when they had a problem with accelerators, and that led to about 51 deaths. So they had to recall Toyota cars and then fix the accelerator problems. They used public relations to keep their image as Toyota company. Then also on July 3rd, 2010, workers cleared off oil washing to a Louisiana Falkland beach, and public relations experts criticized British Petroleum for the way they handled public relations aspect of the oil spill. So we all know that BP had an oil spill in Louisiana, and because they could not use public relations well to keep their image, those who are experts in public relations criticize them for not doing a good job on that. According to research, there are 3 ways to encourage people to do what you want for them. The first one is power. The second one is patronage. And then the third one is persuasion. Power involves ruling by law. Patronage is a polite term for bribery. That is paying someone with favors or money to do what you want for them. But I encourage all media practitioners and public relations people to use the third one, which is persuasion. The act of using arguments or reasoning to induce someone to do something for you. PR belongs to the persuasion side of the 3. And just like advertising, public relations work is not a mass medium. So public relations people, they support the media industry, and they are supposed to help shape public opinion. So I encourage all public relations people to shape public opinion about issues of organizations or agencies. And they can also join advertising agencies, as is done in America. In America, you have about 150,000 people who are working in public relations from over 4,000 different firms. So I encourage most public relations people in Africa to join advertising agencies. They can get money from there instead of doing their main jobs too. And the PR people often deal with advertising agencies as part of their job. So PR and advertising are interrelated. That is why I am saying that advertising and public relations go hand in hand. And public relations officials must be involved in policy and decision-making process. Here, I enjoin most, media practitioners to deal with public relations people, because it will help the public relations people to be part of every decision-making that organizations and agencies should make. Public relations people are key components when organizations are making decisions. They should be called to the decision-making table so that they will be part of the process of making a decision. I encourage governments and national agencies, education ministries, agencies, universities, religious organizations, non-profit organizations such as hospitals, churches, the mosque, museums, and charitable organizations, then athletic teams, entertainment organizations, international organizations, as well as business organizations, both big and small, to use public relations professionals in the way they do their things. It's going to help them to link with the media to make the job of reaching the public very easy. Because responsibilities of the public relation people include writing, editing, media relations, special events, public speaking, production tasks, researching, programming, counseling, training, and management. They find ways to attract attention of the press and to provide publicity, which creates events and presents information so that the press and the public will pay attention. Publicity is different from advertising. Advertising messages are paid for, while publicity is free. So publicity is considered an uncontrolled use of the media because the public relations person provides information to the press, but has no control over how that information will appear. The press presents the story. You know how the media works and make judgments on by providing access to events when it becomes necessary. It is precisely because people in the media and people in PR people should know how each other work, which is a very important piece of African media. And public relations is growing globally, and we must embrace it in addition to our vibrant media. They should be free to do their job and allowed to innovate on stories and press releases. The caveat here is that negative public relations can spread very quickly on the web, where everyone is free to post damaging comments about an organization or an agency. Therefore, African public relations need new technologies, especially the internet, as a way to deliver public relation messages, access to information distribution, and then news organizations. And then they have to work internationally on some projects due to its global nature to adjust to global cultural differences that global exposure brings. My friends, this concludes what I want to talk about the media, and we need our media not bought, rented, or an opinion press, but free, fair, not corrupt, research-based, and avoiding conflict of interest. They should be paid well to excel in these areas and help build our young democracies. Thank you very much, all those who contributed. God bless us all, and next week you hear from me again when I'll talk about religion and leadership. God bless you. Bye-bye.